accidentally walked into an invisible crime network without even realizing it, and it taught me more about passport privilege than the last 6 years of traveling and working in Southeast Asia ever have.
A day in the life in Bali.
If I got to spend the rest of my days like this, I would be one happy man.
Come spend the day with me as a solo backpacker traveling Southeast Asia who prioritizes slow travel and holistic living.
How I traveled the world at just 18 years old.
If this video doesn't make you want to come to Brazil, honestly, I don't get it. Anyway, spend the day with me in Rio.
I quit my high-paying 9-to-5 job in London to become a digital nomad.
Recently, I took a short trip across the land border into Cambodia, spent a few minutes there, and then re-entered Vietnam. And it left me asking this question: how did crossing borders become a chore for some, an inconvenience, frictionless admin? However, for others, it's violent, dangerous, or even deadly. In 2026, Brits gallivant the world holding a little blue book in their hands that quietly opens so many doors for them. Currently, the UK passport allows British people to walk into around 190 countries with ease, which is far more than most people on the planet have access to. It's a lottery ticket that we were born with, and I guess rarely ever think about, whilst at the same time, these countries are the ones tightening immigration policies and voting to close borders. With the rise of parties like Reform, I'm sure you've heard the term stop the boats, take back control of our country, and other countries such as Denmark restricting who can come in and who can't. The message appears to be, you're not allowed in, but keep all the other formerly colonized countries open for us, because we're not immigrants. We're expats. We're allowed into your countries, but you're not allowed into ours. So we have two different words for essentially the same action. If you are, say, a white British person and you are traveling Asia, you are living and working in Thailand, you'll be seen as an expat. If you are a Thai person that's moved to the UK, you will be labeled as an immigrant or a migrant. The word expat to me implies status, it's glamorous, it's temporary, like you're kind of chasing an experience, you're on a gap year, for example. Whilst the word immigrant implies tests, paperwork, background checks, and having to prove that you deserve to be there. It's the same movement with a different label, but this language tells you whose mobility is seen as desirable and whose mobility is seen as a threat. In the words of Harsha Walia, the border is not a wall, but a system of power. So it's not just a physical line, it's a layered system of biometric gates, detention centers, databases, and economic structures that controls who moves and on what terms. So how did we get here? Today I'm going to dive into passport privilege, global mobility, and the horrifying discovery of what I saw at the Cambodian border. So let's talk about the first time I noticed my passport privilege. So I was planning a trip to Japan with a group of friends from countries that are seen as less desirable. So my South African and Indian friends spent weeks scrambling to put documents together. They had to fill in long visa forms, they had to prove residency, bank statements, and they had to have pre-booked flights and hotels. And they had to pay for everything up front without even knowing if they'd be accepted or not. There's actually even whole websites that are geared towards this anxiety. So you will see websites such as fakeflight.com or onwardtravel.com, and you basically just type in where you're going, you pay a small fee, and it will give you a real flight ticket that reserves a seat for you on a plane for 48 hours, and it's purely for proof of onward travel. The reason that you have to have proof of onward travel is to show that you're not at risk and that you are actually planning to leave that country at some point, that you're just on a holiday. Meanwhile, me and my British friends didn't even have to apply for a visa. We could literally just rock up at the Japanese border. In the end, my South African friends were accepted with all of the correct documentation, but then my Indian friend, who did the exact same process and had the exact same documents, was rejected without an explanation and ended up losing a lot of money because of it. Sociologist Stephen Mao writes about how visa-free mobility has increased overall since the 1970s, but in a very uneven way. Citizens of OECD countries, basically wealthy nations, have gained more and more mobility rights, whilst many African, Asian, and Middle Eastern countries have seen stagnation or even decline. He calls this the global mobility divide. So when people say that the world is more open than ever, we need to ask the question, open for who? I've always been conscious that my passport was stronger than others, but it wasn't until a recent border trip that I realized how dark some of these borders actually can be. So if you've ever lived or traveled Southeast Asia for an extended period of time, you will have encountered a visa run at some point. It essentially means you leave the country that you want to spend more time in, cross over a land or air border for a couple days, and then you come back into that country to extend the stay. Now, people will often fly to the nearest city, say they might pop to Bangkok for the weekend, get a wee khao soi, if you know, you know, and then fly back into that country. However, flying out of the country for the weekend can often be tiring, expensive, and inconvenient. But sometimes people look for a less tiring and cheaper alternative. For example, you can cross a land border. There's a land border, for example, near Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. It's about 80 kilometers away, about 2 hours on a bus, and it's called Moc Bai. So basically what you do is you book for a visa agent. They will take you on a bus to the border, you will cross through the border, and then you will come back in. At that border, you will see like print shops, printing new visas. The whole thing is a little bit absurd, but it was never scary to me. That was until I noticed the casinos. Now, everybody that has spent a long period of time in Asia has heard about the border casinos before. It is common knowledge that they operate. These borders have a strange dual reality. On one side, you have expats doing visa runs, and on the other side, you have Vietnamese people coming across the border to gamble for the weekend. Now, if you don't know, gambling is actually illegal in Vietnam. So it's become quite a normalized activity for the Vietnamese to travel across the border to go to the casinos, gamble, participate in cockfighting. It's a way to let off steam, and it's a bit of a playground that attracts the Vietnamese locals. Now, there's plenty of incentives for the Vietnamese to come across the border for the weekend. There's on-site entertainment. Sometimes they get discounts or vouchers. So a lot of the income generated there comes from the locals in Vietnam. There's also cockfighting, which is an ancient cultural practice in the region, which dates back centuries. But it's also illegal, and it's now described as regional reporting as a professional multi-million-dollar industry. Together, the casinos and the arenas create what you could call a cross-border pleasure economy. There's money, there's risk, there's entertainment flowing back and forth across this tiny line. And it's not the first border of its kind. There are similar casino zones all along Asian borders. Even last year, I went on a trip to Koh Rong in Cambodia, and to get to the island of Koh Rong, you have to pass through the port city of Sihanoukville. And I found that the place had a really odd aura to it. It was a bit eerie because it had like half-finished towers, like industrial projects, and we were told that there was a lot of casinos in the area.
Welcome to Cyber Slave Hell. Where we are is Sihanoukville, Cambodia, and it is the center of the world's largest modern-day cyber slave compounds. This might look at first like some kind of average Chinese casino town. What's even stranger though, I guess, is that most of these casinos are just fronts. They're for laundering money and for trafficking humans.
Actually, I went on a night out and I bumped into a Chinese guy who claimed that he owned one of the casinos in Sihanoukville. At the time, I didn't really know what went on there. He said he would sort us out with like the VIP treatment and drinks, and I said to my friends, fuck it, let's go check it out. But I was obviously being a bit dumb and naive, and I'm so glad that we didn't end up doing it. Maybe I wouldn't be here making this video right now if I'd gone. There's even a TikTok that I saw recently of someone attempting to flee a balcony in Sihanoukville. And this video, next to all the news reports you see, it starts to feel like it's less like a one-off and maybe more like a window into something systemic. Because it turns out there aren't just two realities to these borders. There's actually a third, the underground network. So when I was researching for this video, I kept running into the same types of news articles. They were mostly from the Khmer Times and regional news outlets. I also saw reports from NGOs and UN agencies. Now I'm going to put some of the headlines that I encountered on the screen now. Vietnamese national jumps to his death at casino. Foreign women found dead in front of casino. Foreigner dies in casino leap. Foreigner beaten to death outside Bavette casino. Foreigner found hanged in casino. Over 50 Vietnamese stage mass breakout from the Cambodian border casino. Foreign casino worker commits suicide. Police investigate after body of foreign casino employee found. Foreign casino worker in suicide leap. And foreigner jumps to death at Bavette Casino. Now, all of these are separate articles. They're all different people with different victims, just to clear that up. So what I began to see was a pattern, proof of what you could call structural environments of harm. So the border doesn't just pull in tourists and gamblers, but it also pulls in workers and migrants. And it appears to repeatedly become a site of violence. According to reports, it funnels foreign money, labor, and vulnerability into loosely regulated zones. So investigations and survivor testimonies describe casino workers living on high floors, doing long shifts and with limited exits. And that's where I came across dozens of workers staging mass breakout, running out of compounds in these border zones and attempting to flee. So when I first discovered these casinos, I just assumed that the people working in the casinos were doing ordinary casino work, like dealing cards, pouring drinks, and I just kind of assumed that they were working there doing long shifts. But it turned out that the money is actually made upstairs. According to the UN and Amnesty reports, many of these complexes rely on migrant labor and online fraud rather than just gambling. Casino owners need people that can speak multiple languages, and often migrant workers are easier to control. That is because they have less protection, say they are further away from families, and they have very little political leverage. Vietnamese people are often targeted with fake job ads on Facebook, Zalo, which is like the Vietnamese WhatsApp, Telegram, where they're promised easy work, high salaries, accommodation included. It's appealing to them because it feels low risk. They can travel there by bus and they can be there pretty quickly. Border zones are often jurisdictionally fuzzy, lightly supervised with high cash flow. Human rights groups say that in many cases, these places are no longer operating as regular casinos. They're actually cyber fraud compounds disguised as casinos. So in these articles, I heard time and time again the same structural features. Locked rooms, high floors, people attempting to escape, people on computers for 10 to 12 hours a day, windows that don't open, stairwells that are locked, and CCTV everywhere. So what are these businesses actually doing? So there are a multitude of businesses operating. So you have romance scams where they build long-term relationships with people online with the goal to extract money or to extract crypto, or say they have like a fake emergency that they need money for. There's crypto and investment scams. So people posing as advisors and convincing people to deposit money into fake apps that mimic real-life platforms. There's also fake trading and gambling apps. These websites actually look legitimate, but they're rigged so that the house always wins. Sometimes they actually let you withdraw a little bit at first, kind of give you that false hope that you could win something to build trust, and then kind of block everything up. There's also fake job recruitment, which I've already covered. And then finally, we have pig butchering scams.
那杀猪盘基本上是有3个步骤。那第一个步骤就是熏猪。
He was a lonely man in need of comfort.
杀猪那个猪其实指的就是受害人的意思。
造梦，所谓的造梦是什么？现在骗子的高明之处，你们都不知道啊。
第二个步骤也就是养猪。狗推其实是诈骗公司里面给业务员取的一个名字。后一段杀猪的这个阶段。
最后把客户钓到极致，他手上有多少钱，全部都给他钓干净。只有一个字儿，就是让他们对你有一个字儿，怕。
Now, a pig butchering scam is the Chinese term for a long con. So essentially, you fatten up the victim over a long period of time with the goal to extract money from them. When the Chinese government began cracking down, many of these criminal networks shifted operations to countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, and Laos. So when I say I walked through an invisible crime network disguised as tourism, I really mean it. I just didn't know it at the time. It was only later when I began reading reports, I realized that I walked through the front stage of a system that's designed designed to weaponize global connectivity and economic desperation. It exploits workers for forced labor, and it also preys on vulnerable people for psychological manipulation. But the crazy thing is that a half-day errand, a chore, something that I moaned about, is actually something deadly and violent for others. So what does all of this have to do with passports? So let's circle back. The world is not borderless. It's bordered in increasingly sophisticated and unequal ways. We must confront a paradox. Mobility is more regulated than ever before, even as it's branded as universally accessible. And at the heart of this disparity is one of the most deceptively mundane documents, the passport. Historian John Torpey, in The Invention of the Passport, explains that modern states monopolize the legitimate means of movement. They decide who gets to cross which borders and under what terms. So before strictly defined political borders, the world was actually organized around natural territories, such as rivers, mountain ranges, trade routes, rather than precise drawn lines on a map. People could move around more freely with occasional letters of safe conduct rather than universal paperwork that we have today. I didn't actually realize myself how young borders actually were. So in the 19th century, during imperialism, many borders in Africa and Asia were drawn by European powers, often completely disregarding the indigenous or historical boundaries. Now, after World War I in the 20th century, a large portion of international borders were finalized after the 1919 Paris Peace Conference. So this is when the modern passports that we know today were standardized. After World War I, there was heightened fear and instability, so passports were introduced to control movement across borders. So powerful countries such as Britain, Germany, France helped to set those standards, but quietly made their documents the most trusted. So colonized countries inherited the borders drawn by the colonizers, but didn't get the same level of trust. So you end up with this hierarchy. Colonizer countries tend to be ranked as trustworthy, whilst former colonies are coded as risky. So the same borders for some have completely different rules and experiences. So essentially, the colonizers created the borders that they now benefit from. Mock by itself is a French colonial border, and it was drawn in the late 19th century. So essentially, officers on a map sketched those lines and said, yep, we'll just put the border there. The officers that drew the lines would never live with the consequences of those decisions, just like so many borders. So you can think of passports in 3 tiers. So you have tier 1, so like the global north, UK, US, Europe. These are the countries that did the most colonizing. And you have a huge list of countries that you can enter visa-free. Now, tier 2, you have some freedom, but have a few more hoops to jump through. But it will be a little bit easier if you have the required money and documents to get into those countries. So you might be able to move regionally quite easily, but global mobility is a bit patchier. Now, finally, we have tier 3, and these are restricted passports with very short visa-free lists. They have high rejection rates and they have expensive fees as well. So these could be countries such as Nigeria or Pakistan, and these tend to be colonized countries or politically marginalized countries. Ayelet Shahar uses the phrase selective closure for many, selective opening for few. So sometimes it actually blows my mind that this little blue book that I carry in my hand has a chip in it that will open an e-gate or not, depending on what it reads. So there's a paper that was done in 2024 and it's called The Passports They Carry. So this study was done on scholars who were attempting to travel for educational conferences in the global north to be educated on global issues. So they found that Schengen short-term visa rejection rates rose from around 5% to roughly around 16 to 17%. One analyst estimates that rejected Schengen visas cost applicants around 130 million euros in 2023, with roughly 90% of those fees being paid by African and Asian countries. So passport privilege doesn't just restrict leisurely travel, it also shapes who can produce and benefit from knowledge about global issues. It decides who gets to be in the room and who is excluded from conversations that they have a right to be leading. So this shows that whilst Western travelers aren't able to freely roam around the earth, the same system disables and confines migrants mostly in need of mobility. So enter the digital nomad.
Guys, I have been homeless for a long time, since 2022, and basically I'm a digital nomad. I don't have a home base, I don't pay rent, I just travel around the world, like get Airbnbs or like short-term accommodations, and I have lived in Hawaii, Australia, Sydney, Bali, Thailand, like you name it, I have lived in. I have been in this villa, this gorgeous villa in in Bali for the past month, but it's time to move out.
You know what's so funny right now is I'm at work. Like, in a world where everything is online, I don't get why people are still working in an office. It's like...
So in recent years, there's been a surge of people becoming digital nomads, basically people leaving their home country to live lives of continual mobility. So basically, they just float from one country to the next with a laptop. So after COVID, millions of jobs proved that they didn't actually need an office to work from. Companies discovered that more people could work from home, and people discovered that they didn't want to go into the office every day. And home, in theory, could be anywhere with a Wi-Fi connection. And at the same time, many countries have actually rolled out this new digital nomad visa, which allows people to live and work easily in their countries and kind of spend the money that they earn in their economies. In 2025, the State of Independence reports there are about 18.5 million digital nomads in the US. So this puts it at about 12% of the US. So this is actually becoming quite a normal way to work. So on paper, the positives are obvious. It gives you freedom, you have flexibility over your own time, you can freely travel. Digital nomads can earn in strong currencies and live in locations where their money will go further. They're not chained to a commute or a mortgage. If you hate your job or your city, you can just leave. And the BBC and countless think pieces have called it the epitome of freedom. You have the ability to travel, work remotely, and design your own life. However, that's only one side of the story. There's been reports of loneliness, shallow relationships, and lack of community. And there's also been a lot of nomad hotspots that have popped up. So think of like Bali, Lisbon, Da Nang, Chiang Mai. You have co-working spaces, iced lattes, smoothie bowls, and a community of people speaking English everywhere. The negatives don't feel as sharp when you're paying half your rent that you'd pay in London for a beachside villa. And you're also surrounded by like-minded people doing the same thing as you. However, critics point out that this new mobility fuels gentrification and over-tourism.
Most digital nomads are just modern colonizers. They move to a less developed country, drive up rent, price locals out of their homes, don't pay any tax, and then they leave 6 months later and do that somewhere else. And even if you try really hard and have really good intentions, it's almost impossible to have a net positive impact.
So it drives up the prices for the locals, making some cities nearly unlivable for them. Landlords see that foreigners can pay more, so the rents go up. Cafes swap local dishes for Western food. And in places like Barcelona, researchers now say that digital nomads, alongside with Airbnb and cruise ships, have become part of the pressure on housing in those local areas. However, for governments, businesses, and the economy, it's not all bad. Tourism really does grow local economies. Take Ho Chi Minh City, for example, in Vietnam. It's been ranked one of the fastest developing cities in the whole world over the next decade. And this is fueled partly by foreign investment, manufacturing, and booming tourism. So yes, digital nomads do drive up the prices and can accelerate this inequality, but they also pour money into local economies and help to justify investments such as roads, airports, infrastructure, and public services. On a GDP graph, it looks like a win, but the question is, a win for who? Now, this is where it starts to become a bit of a political contradiction. So while Western nomads are celebrating borderless living in, say, Bali, Thailand, places like the UK and the US are obsessed with taking back control of the borders. Parties like Reform have built their entire manifestos on tightening immigration. And in the US, there's a similar energy around ICE and border enforcement. So what's interesting is who's actually voting for these policies. Post-election polling suggests that majority of Reform voters are in their 50s and 60s, with only a small slice of 18 to 20-year-olds backing them. So it's not the younger generations that seem to be supporting and driving these policies. I think what's really tough is that people in my generation can't afford to buy houses. They have less and less disposable income. They're paying £800 a month for a tiny room in a shared apartment, and they're being told to cut back on buying a coffee. So it's no surprise that my generation's beginning to look for an exit.
I don't think people are leaving the UK in droves because they hate the UK. Like, I've posted a few times now about how the UK is bad vibes, why I left the UK, and the comment sections are flooded with, like, the government this, racism that, like, the country sucks, it's evil, whatever. And, like, okay, maybe some of those things are true, but, like, for me, that's not the reason I left. And I don't think it's the reason most people leave. I think the reason you leave the UK is because the version of adulthood that you want isn't attainable in the UK. Like, I think once you hit your 20s and 30s in the UK, it's like, just manage. Like, manage your expectations, manage the rising cost of living, manage the disappointment you're probably not going to own your own home. And like, you're just kind of expected to just be like, oh, okay, well, it could be worse. Like, well, that's life. But if you're sitting there like, is this it? Like, is this all there is? Then I think you have to get out of the UK.
A British Council survey recently found that 7 in 10 Brit would consider living and working abroad. And the Adam Smith Institute reports that roughly a quarter to a third of 18 to 30-year-olds are actively planning or are seriously considering emigrating. Now, these reasons aren't mysterious. Most are expecting housing to become even less affordable, and many say that they don't see a future owning their own home or building the life that their parents had. And when they're constantly inundated with TikToks of people working remotely from a beach, the appeal really makes sense. Like, can you really blame them? What's interesting to me is that such a big chunk of Brits are wanting to leave their own country. They're becoming the migrants that their own country are trying to keep out. The difference is that migrants that are attempting to enter our country are often fleeing war and are struggling to be accepted in those countries, whilst young Brits who are also leaving for a better life are having a lot less friction in order to do so. So those few minutes that I spent on the Cambodian border were logistically nothing for me. However, they really opened my eyes to the reality of what other people deal with every day. I was doing a casual border run. Locals were treating it as a casino strip, a weekend escape, but somewhere behind those concrete buildings, people were being held on high floors, working long shifts, and for them, the border has become a trap. The exact same border, the same line on a map with completely different realities. We built these borders, we invented these documents, we created this hierarchy, and most of us probably moved for it without really thinking about our privilege, almost without noticing what's really going on, complaining and moaning about it, whilst others are forced into underground territories that are being enabled by these borders. So next time you breeze through an e-gate, it might be worth asking yourself, why is this so easy for me? Who is this impossibly hard for? And who is hidden out of sight?